So I'm desperate to hear about this 18th century property, and also maybe just a bit of background, because you have mentioned, some bog standard semis, terraced houses, but then you have mentioned this 18th century farmhouse. Tell us a
Yes,
bit more about
yes.
that and how you jumped on that. Is this your shiny penny syndrome?
Well, I saw this house 18 months prior to when I bought it. So basically, a little bit of a backstory of this property. It was on the market for 425. Bearing in mind it not been renovated in the last 90 years. The previous owner was 94 and he passed away. And he lived there for 93 years. So you can imagine the state that it was in. And it was on the market for 425, and I just thought, it's never worth that in that state. And the area is fantastic, and you've got a view of the viaduct. It's Denbydale in West Yorkshire and things. But yeah, at 425, I just thought, I can't make this work at all. But I love the house, I love the area, I love the land, and everything like that. Anyway, over the past 12 months, the price was dropping. 25 grand there, 25 grand there, blah blah blah. And anyway, it then went to auction, and I thought, right, this is the chance. This is the chance to get it. And I remember viewing it, and I took one of my friends with me, and he said, "You better get this house. It's beautiful," and stuff. So anyway, it went to auction with a guide price of 250k, and the reserve price was 325. So I thought, right, let's just go in at 300 cash. Let's just test the water a little bit. And obviously, I do like putting in pre-auction offers just to see where the vendors are at,
Yeah.
just to get a feel, and things. And anyway, so weeks went by, we didn't hear anything about this pre-auction offer at all. And bearing in mind, I was working with a new investor as well, so I wanted to impress him and things. Um, so anyway, I stood firm on the 300 grand cash. And actually, what we later found out was that there was issues with probate, there was issues with land registry. The boundaries weren't updated on the property because they sold off some land, etc. So whoever bought this house actually weren't going to complete under auction conditions, bearing in mind it was a 56-day completion. So I said, okay, well, I'll buy the house, but at 300 grand, but it won't be under auction conditions, because obviously if it is under auction conditions, we'll get penalised for it being late, even though the issues are on the vendor side, and things. So anyway, so 8 months went by, and basically we were still in legals waiting obviously for this property, but
Oh.
yet land registry hadn't been updated, probate have not been granted, and this, that, the other. So I thought, right, okay, at the end of the day, let's just go back and renegotiate. Bearing in mind, we had a couple of surveys done on the property, and obviously it was looking a lot worse than what we initially thought, etc. So going backwards and forwards, I wanted some money off, 25k to be exact. And anyway, backwards and forwards, vendor said no. I was like, well, you're not going to sell it then. Definitely not to me. And obviously, at this point, the vendors are getting really, peed off. Why is it taking so long? With land registry, probate, etc. So anyway, we negotiated the price at 275. So I was thinking, great, what an absolute steal.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, the GDV of this property is about 560, 570 and things. And, the property itself didn't need any extensions. What was there was perfect. We just had to obviously, you know, actually do a full back to brick renovation, but it was actually more a restoration project, and things. So we ended up obviously buying it at the 275, which is a massive win, probably about 50k under market value, really, and things. So we did the renovation, and the renovation was 5 months of hard work, and we turned the farmhouse back into, a contemporary,
Oh.
farmhouse with all the original features, vaulted ceiling, exposed stone, you know,
Oh.
it is amazing, but it's got that contemporary feel, LED lights, quartz worktops, etc., herringbone flooring, and yeah, it's actually currently on the market now for 570. So it's a really, really good project. It's one of my favorite projects that I've ever done, and I personally love it. So yeah, and I actually held a party there last year for my year end and things, and having 80 people in the garden, you can tell how
Oh,
big the garden is, and
yeah.
everybody just saying, wow, what a transformation. And it's a massive, massive transformation, and one that I'm very, very proud of, to be honest.
Oh, that sounds really wonderful to be able to bring something so special back to light. And
Yeah,
obviously, it was a real, ended up being a bit of a project over the way, trying to get over all of those elements. Now,
yeah,
I know I've definitely seen this because you do share a lot of what you do on social media and yeah, and another thing that the way we know each other is we actually met, didn't we, on the property
yeah,
graduate,
we did, yes, yes, we
which
did.
was
That seems so long ago as well.
I know, well, it was a few years ago now. Time does
Yeah,
go quite fast, doesn't it? But so tell us about sort of that side of things, because a lot of people, again, have a lot of fears around sort of putting themselves out there. In fact, I was talking to a lady the other day, and the reason she hadn't done anything on social media is she was so terrified of trolling. And I was kind
mm,
of like, wow, I'm
mm.
really surprised that is a real mindset thing, because I've been doing
Yeah, yeah,
social media for years. I'm not saying that I've got millions of followers, absolutely not, but enough. And
mm,
I don't think I've had anyone who said anything really nasty. People have said the odd strange thing,
yeah.
but nothing bad. So there is this kind of real fear of putting ourselves out there. So, yeah, can you just sort of tell us a little bit about how you are on social media and also why you decided to go onto the property graduate?
Yeah, so the property graduate for me, actually, I saw it the year before. I think it was the first year when Alfie won it.
Yeah.
And I thought this would be great, it's the apprentice of property and stuff. But I thought actually I'm probably a little bit too early stage to go on the first series and stuff. That's when I was like kind of around, I think it was around the fourth, fifth, or sixth flip that I was doing. So I thought I needed a bit more experience, to be honest, which I'm glad I did actually.
Yeah.
And then I think it was the second series we was on, and then obviously that's when really things were kicking up, and I was, raising a lot of money and working with investors. So this is perfect timing. And I just thought, what have you got to lose? Like that's literally what I think. What have you got to lose? Oh, what you've got to lose is what, people not particularly liking you, or not coming across well, or whatever. But at least you took the chance, because I always think personally, and there's this quote that sticks with me, is that if you've got if you've got the chance, take the opportunity. And I thought, well, this is the chance now. I'm not, yeah, it's traveling to St Albans and filming, a couple of weekends, but what a great experience and stuff. So I personally just look at it from a really positive point of view and say, what a great opportunity. And if you learn things across the way, along the way, which I definitely did, then I think great. And I like a challenge as well, and I am competitive. So I think it ticked all those boxes. But going back to kind of social media, for me, I think, again, I think, well, what's the worst anybody can say? Like, they don't know me personally. I think some people might think they do, because I'm very present on social media. But I have a very, very tight knit group of friends, and they know them, they're my friends. Social media is not that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, yeah, I like to be in front of the camera. I like to, show off my renovations. And bearing in mind, renovations are hard. There is issues that come up. And I want to showcase the lads' work. I want to showcase my vision and things. And social media has got me, some great, great connections. People that I never thought I would connect with. And I'm talking up and down the country. I'm talking abroad, also investors as well that have come to me through social media. So actually the positives have outweighed any negatives that I've ever had. And actually, in terms of trolling, I don't think I really had that. Yes, obviously you get a couple of comments here and there. But I tell you what, everything that I put on social media, I can back up. And I think it only really becomes an issue, if you're doing things, or you're saying things on social media where you can't back it up. But I know full well everything that I put on there, or what we're doing, or the what renovation we're doing, I can back up. And I openly say, if you want to come to my renovations, feel free, because I've got site days where you can come and visit them, and stuff. So yeah, more than happy for anybody to come and take a look themselves.
And I think you're also extremely authentic. So I remember there was, gosh, I think about 20 of us that wasn't there to start with,
There
and
was,
some
yes.
were kind of outgoing, and some, were less so. And but it was great, even in just such a short period of time. We all got on so well.
We did. We
It
did.
was, yeah, it was wonderful. But equally, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how much older I am than you, because that would just be very upsetting. But I walked into that environment feeling like a bit of an imposter. I was
Mm.
very nervous. Now, obviously, I'm all about behaving like the person who's already achieved the thing that you want to achieve. And
Mhm.
so, I walked in, I have my hat, that's kind of my brand, and that's something that I can, that helps me feel confident.
Yeah.
I did get help with actually deciding what to wear as well,
Mhm.
because that for me, I was cripes, I've really got to make sure that I don't look really ridiculous. But how did you sort of walk into that scenario and kind of potentially silence those self-doubts that creep in these situations?
Yeah, I think it's always good to have those like nerves and stuff, because I think it shows that you care. And I think, yeah, obviously driving down, I was like, what am I doing? But actually, if you look at the bigger picture, right, there's more good that's going to come from it than bad, really. I think personally, for me. And I think, whatever I've done, I'm proud of, from where I've come to actually the journey that I'm on, especially obviously back then as well. Obviously being a little bit younger than what I were. I think, I just personally own it. I think, this is who I am, this is what I've done, this is my track record, and this is where I'm going. If you're on the journey, great. If you're not, that's okay with me. So that's literally just how I am. And I think as well, I think it's really, really good to push yourself out your comfort zone. And I see opportunities like that as literally pushing yourself out your comfort zone. And again, winning Young Property Investor of the Year last year, that's exactly the same thing. There was a massive application process, written video things as well. And obviously, their application process is really, really tough as well. And obviously with industry experts. But again, I go into situations like that thinking, what have I got to lose? I just think go for it. Absolutely go for it. And I think that's personally me just having a mindset of being positive, being upbeat, but actually, what is the worst that can happen? And to me, the worst that can happen is nothing compared to what opportunities, or what things, or what positive things can come from it. So then that's when I just go, yeah, let's do it.
You make it sound
So
very sort of simple, but it is actually, although there's a bit of sort of a real philosophical element to that, inherently you're just being very matter of fact and just
yeah,
seeing
yeah,
things for how they
yeah,
are, which actually
yeah.
is really powerful, because we have I call it the little black dog who sits on your shoulder, kind of going, well, you've done this and you haven't done that. And it's kind of just brushing it aside and going, look, these are the facts. I'm just going to give it a go. And,
Yeah,
if I fall on my face, I fall on
exactly.
my face. You're going to just get back up again.
Exactly. 100%. And I really think if you've given something your best shot, like I did at the property graduate, like I did at, Young Property Investor of the Year, and all my renovations, that's the only thing anybody can ever ask of you, is to do your best. And if you know you've given your best, you walk away with your head held high. And that's just what's been installed with me from a really, really young age, and I think it works. And I guess, yes, obviously, there is anxiety out there, and anxiousness, leading up to these things. I'm not saying I don't have that, because at times there's very much sleepless nights that happens. But again, you've just got to be. I'm just very matter of fact, and I think, what is the worst that that can happen. And I just think go for it. It's good to step out of your comfort zone, because that's how you grow as an individual. And then that's how you think, well, actually, that wasn't so bad. So now I'm going to go for something else that's probably on a different level, And again, that's how you grow, really.
Incredible. So, with that in mind, to an external person looking in, property is inherently quite a male dominated world. As you said yourself, it's generally people who've had quite a successful career and then think, oh, cripes, I want to do a bit more about my pension. I'm going to buy some buy to lets. And people tend to get in it from that way. So you've really come in from a very opposite angle. You're young, you're a female. On top of that, you have literally thrown yourself in at the deep end, actually physically doing the work as well, alongside the trades. Is there sort of any advice you would give people? Because let's be fair, we all hear it. There's a lot of excuses that we can all create and
Oh, of
generate
course.
for
Yeah.
ourselves, but you have really overcome some incredibly massive ones there. What would you perhaps give advice to young people, maybe to females, who are, and obviously it relates to everyone, but who are coming into this industry and looking to get started?
Yeah, I think, my main advice to anybody is that, there is so much free content out there in the world, far more than what there was when I was starting out and things. And I think, just surround yourself with that content, take it as a pinch of salt, some of it, absorb some of it and see what you think to the bits in the middle. And then also with that, surround yourself literally with people that are doing what you want to do. So if that's flipping, if that's rent to rent, if that's service accommodation, whatever that is, surround yourself with those people. Send somebody a message on Instagram, for example. That's one step forward. Asking for their advice, or asking, can I come on a site day? Or what networking events, attending and things like that. So, being in and around property is great to obviously get that initial information. But the only way I personally believe that somebody is ever going to learn how to do property is by taking action. So at some point, you've got to put your money where your mouth is. And for me, I did that back when I was buying my first ever house and having that 20 grand on the line and thinking, if this all goes to pot, I could lose the 20 grand. And at some point, you've got to do that. If it's, in 3 months' time, a year's time, 2 years' time, whatever that is. But at some point, you've got to take action, and that action can look very different for anybody. If that's, meeting a potential investor, doing an investor pack, going on viewings, going to auctions, etc., etc. At some point, you've got to get away from, your laptop and your computer screen and take the action in person. And, I think that's really only where the true learning comes from, and the true doing to get to them where you want to be.
Have you seen, though, for instance, going into estate agents, you've talked about talking to auction houses, you are young. Are they kind of, have you had anyone where you've thought, actually, that's really rude, and overcome that?
I've had a couple of, like, scenarios like that, but I tell you what, if you know your knowledge, and if you're concrete on your figures and things like that, and again, I think me coming from a accountancy background has helped, because I'm confident within my numbers. As soon as you speak to that agent and you're kind of, thinking, okay, I think it's going to be worth X when this amount of work is going to be done. And if you're challenged in an agent on that, which I've done many times, by um by the way, and if you're backing up exactly what you're saying, how can that estate agent argue with you when you know that four other houses on that particular street are sold at a price? Then when you're looking at your renovation, that you can push the price slightly. Bearing in mind, every renovation that I've done, I push the ceiling price in that area. Then I'm thinking, well, I know I can do it for X. And then when you prove that a couple of times, agents start to think, well, actually, yeah, she does know what she's talking about, and that's when you get the traction. So would I say that happens now, where I speak with agents or investors, for example? No, it doesn't happen now, but I think probably in the early days it did. But I'm a true believer that you prove people wrong by doing. And yeah, that's exactly what I've done.
Oh, you are incredible. That's yeah. So it really, for you, it seems that you've got your confidence from that knowledge, from that
Yeah,
understanding, being able to sort of
yeah,
question them and just sticking to your guns. You understand your numbers,
exactly,
and that's the
exactly.
way I'm doing that. So with that kind of learning and obviously this mindset, is there any kind of mindset practices that do you have any sort of daily mindset habits or routines that you believe are key to the successes that you have?
I would say probably every night before I actually go to sleep, I actually say the things that have gone well that day, like in my head, this has been my day. Things have gone well. Like yesterday, we had an offer on a renovation. And I was like, great, we've had an offer on the renovation.
Yeah.
So every night before I go to sleep, I go through the positive things and I go through the things that I need to take to the next day to work on to get to a certain point. So every bit that I do is like goal setting or getting to that initial goal, basically, and things. So that's always really good. And I personally as well, I like preach gratitude. Like I'm really, really grateful for the opportunities that I've had, but also I'm grateful to myself for taking the risks. And then now they're like obviously paying off because I'm doing bigger renovations, £1 million, deals. And I'm thinking, this is amazing. And also being in a position now where I can look to buy portfolios of 30 odd houses, which is like the next step for me. I'm thinking, God, like I remember when I was that girl with just 20K, like that I was risking on the line. Now I'm risking like, like millions plus, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the opportunity, and as well, just the process. I think because your wealth really, or what you do in property isn't built up in a day, it's built over time. And there's that old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day, and I truly, truly believe that.
And it sounds as well, you've mentioned that you do a lot of, problem solving and having that
I think every
gratitude.
day I do
Yeah.
problem solving. Every day.
And do you think is that just across the board? Are you just, I mean, I know for me that there isn't a kind of, it's always problem solution. There's not kind of anything in between for me. Some people are like, oh, why has that happened? It's like at that moment you've got a problem and it's solved, and then we can come back afterwards, obviously, and see if there's anything wrong. But
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So where are we now, Emma? So obviously you started in your mid 20s. You're now
30.
30.
I've just
Yes.
turned 30. Yeah.
Congratulations. So you've just done 30. You've done how many flips now?
14. 14. Yeah.
14 flips, my goodness. So you had,
Yeah.
and what I see really strong with you is you've got such a strong goal, you've got a really strong why, you clearly make strong, fast decisions, and then you take massive action with the knowledge that you've got with a huge amount of gratitude. I mean, you're just an absolute package there. So tell us
Thank you.
what's going forward for you? What can we see from Emma Fielding going forward now?
Yeah, so my next kind of thing is actually to buy portfolios of rental properties, and to be fair, probably people are going to think, why are you getting into rentals? Like, everybody's leaving. Perfect.
Yeah.
Everybody's leaving. I'm going in, but I'm going in deep. So that's my plan actually. So we're going to be building up the rental portfolio side very, very quickly. So yeah, we're looking at a portfolio of 30 houses at the minute. The overall plan really over the next kind of 5 to 8-ish years, depending how quick we do it, is to get to 300 rentals, which yeah is a bit like, oh my god.
Wow.
But I tell you what, there's actually somebody that I know locally that's got 250. So again, it goes back to confidence and problem solving and things. And I think, well, if he's got 250 or had 250, why can't I have 300? So, and if you've got the investors, the backing behind you, and the trades and the processes and systems, then I think, what, this is the time to go for it. And what is the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen, obviously I go bankrupt, but if you put the right processes and systems, and you're careful along the way, and you're taking calculated risks, then that technically should not happen. So yeah.
Wow, that sounds awesome. And I'm quite sure that you are going to achieve it. And like all these things, it might not be the straight path that you've considered, but you know absolutely that it might be that sort of babbling brook of a journey
Yeah, and it
to take you.
probably will be. It
Exactly.
probably will be.
Uh,
There'll, there will be many, many twists and turns along the way for sure. It is
yeah.
property at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So
but how exciting. And I think that for me, like that makes me really exciting hearing other people having these huge, incredible goals. And you are, a shining light in opening the possibilities because there's so many of us. And especially, I think, in property with women, in a whole host of us, a lot of us really shrink ourselves back down.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think, and I'm not saying it is just your age, but I think sometimes as people get older, they get battered by life and things happen to them and it
yeah,
can
yeah.
really shrink us back. So seeing somebody like yourself who's just absolutely running down the street, pushing all those
Literally
obstacles,
sprinting.
exactly, obstacles out the way, nothing's going to stop me, but in a really beautiful way as well. You're genuinely a great person. But I've got one sort of final question coming through is when you've sort of looked back on everything, what do you think is the most surprising lesson that you've learned about yourself through the property investing journey?
You know, property isn't easy, and there has been, some testing times along the way. One being cash flow, or things not selling on time and things like that. And do you know what? I really, really learned actually. I'm really, really resilient. And you've got to be in property. If you don't have a very strong backbone, doesn't matter what stuff is coming your way, you've got to deal with it, and you've got to deal with it fast and you've got to make the right decisions. Like you cannot bury your head in the sand or have a day in bed when, shit is happening, basically. And part of my French as well. But when things are happening, and when there's a lot of money at risk as well, and you've got relationships on the line. Luckily nothing terrible has ever happened. But a couple of times, it has been possibly close to getting down to the wire, as I call it. That's when I think you really come into your own, or you really see the true personality that you have as a person. And for me, is that I'm really, really resilient, and I will work my arse off to get it to where I need to be, for example. And again, it takes time. It can take days, it can take weeks, it can take months. But you've just got to knuckle down and get cracking. So yeah, I would say resilience is one of the main things that you've got to have for sure.
That is beautiful. And I think what you clearly have as well, which is something that I've really built upon, is this faith that, no matter what, there will be a solution. No matter what, it will
Of
come over the
course.
line,
Yeah.
all of those kind of things. So you clearly are kind of like, I'm just going to work really hard, smart as well. You're not just, going out there and doing whatever. You're working smart, you're learning, you're surrounding yourself by those right people to
Yeah.
really get you to that end. So yeah, absolutely incredible. So
Thank you, Emma. Thank you.
where can people, if they wanted to follow your journey, learn more about you, invest with you, connect with you, where's the best place to come and find you?
So Facebook and Instagram, Emma Louise Fielding, and oh, actually, yeah, Facebook and LinkedIn, Emma Louise Fielding, and then on Instagram, Emma Property Developments. And yeah, you'll probably just have a good look through of all the renovations that I've done to date.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you.
Emma definitely has an inordinate goal. She has a massive why to be successful. She clearly jumps on and makes decisions. She's got a very philosophical approach to life, very matter of fact, very practical. She then takes massive, massive action. She continues to learn to surround herself with people who have the knowledge and can help her grow forward. And the final fantastic key to her success is massive gratitude of her situation, and those surrounding her. So do remember, property success isn't just about what you do. It's about how you think. When you combine a strong strategy with an unstoppable mindset, there's no limit to what you can achieve. So do reflect today on Emma's journey and do consider what's one action you can take this week that perhaps she's done to help you get closer to your property goals. So remember, if you know anyone who's struggling in their property journey, please share this episode. It could be a game changer that they need. And then remember that the more people that we help, the greater our own wealth in every sense of the word. Growing this community means growing the potential that we all have to succeed together. And do remember, your mindset is your greatest property. Keep building it.